So there's now all central automatic systems, so anybody can just say.
Monitor the screen.
There's now all central automatic.
I'll monitor the screen.
Yeah, hello.
It's only, yeah, it's only water, James. We have had many glasses of wine together. I think we can get away with it. Yes, I know.
Yeah,
What's the hashtag? Just bellogate. We should have two, one for bellogate, two. I think it's bellogate. Speakers are mute.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming along tonight. We'll make a start. This is the closing session of digifest. We've had 40 events this week across UCL, celebrating the wonderful, the wacky, the fun, the inventive digital things that UCL is doing. Sometimes an event in life comes along that's just too good to miss, and this is probably one of those. So we thought we would gather some of the people that are involved in bellogate together to discuss what's happened and tell us a bit more about how it felt to be involved. We have Gavin McLachlan, who is Director of Technology Services in ISD, who was leading the run around on the day. We have Bridget Kenyon, Head of Information Security in ISD. And we have Jane Burns, who is a specialist, Management Science and Information, who's a specialist in communication, and in particular, crisis communication. So I'm going to hand over to Gavin to start, to tell us a bit more about what happened and why it happened. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, everyone. I guess on the part of the presentation is going to say what actually happened since I was directly responsible for the email system. Yeah, Bello or Bellogate or whatever name you want to give to it. Obviously, kind of an interesting phenomenon. One of the early posts that went up was this, which basically says it all. I think analysis of exactly what went on, which shows people replying, people being annoyed and asking them to subscribe, and it just sort of spiraled out of control. And then some people, of course, were quite nice and tried to suggest to me how we could help. Yeah, I'm not sure if that was terribly helpful, but there you go. Very inventive. And then we got a lot of students making confessions. I don't know if I want to know anything more about it, to say the least. And then, of course, everyone wants to impersonate the provost. Lots of fantastic technology, creativity, innovation. Spoofing of emails and some very realistic other emails from explosives in the service desk and others. So that was good to see. And Mike wanted that he did. You're asking. And then, of course, everyone signed up for Sarah Palin. Some people, of course, trying to figure out why that's fun. You never know. Watch the space, right? You never know what will happen. So a little bit about what really happened. I mean, a lot of you were involved and saw all the Twitter and the emails. So I'll show you the sort of 5 steps about how to create an instance like this. So obviously, step 1. Someone in UCL ISD division in my department, so again, I'm responsible, unknowingly made, what seemed like a very tiny error. What they actually did is that they took a file that they had a whole bunch of email addresses in it. Most, but not all, but most of the student email addresses were in it, and they just put it in the wrong place. And an automated robot that people had forgotten about picked that up and created an email list out of it. But unfortunately, created an email list that had no restrictions on it. Obviously, whenever we normally create an email list, it has restrictions. You can't reply all to it. Only certain people are allowed to go ahead and use it. But in this case, it created an unknown, hidden email list that no one knew about. It sat there for 2 weeks, sort of a time bomb ticking away. Until late one night, well, it was actually 6 at night, a student discovered the hidden email list. They must have just been randomly emailing email lists. We don't quite understand how they did it. And they said, oh, wow, I can send all the students to UCL. And then an engineering student replied back, what are you doing? And then, obviously, step 3, everyone joined in, right? And it actually started off pretty slow. It was just a couple of people emailing back and forth. There was only a handful of emails going back. But then someone got on Twitter and announced to all the students, guess what you can do? I've discovered this back door. And boom, it exploded. And there's probably more traffic on Twitter than there was on email. But it was just, very similar to Twitter, except of course email has consequences because obviously all the messages are persistent in the mailboxes. And so students' mailboxes started to grow and grow. Some received over 3,000 emails. And of course, it went viral on Twitter, and it started being reported in the news. And this all happened incredibly fast, faster than we could react. Of course. And then bad things started happening. So UCL got blocked by a number of institutions. So they saw that there was something bad going on at UCL, and they saw the word hack, and the news started reporting it. But since there was very little information apart from Twitter and everything else, they just thought a really horrible thing has happened at UCL. It must be the end of the world, or giant attack or spam, something. So people like the Public Health of England started blocking us. Again, this is all happening in the middle of the night. And then finally, we figured out what was going on. We thought it was. And it turned out not to be. And then of course, I had a lot of people going and saying, shut down all Python students. The emails just shut down. This thing in the world. Problem is that list doesn't exist because it had been accidentally created and never published. So we didn't have it anywhere. Nowhere to shut it down from, until eventually one of my folks discovered it deep in a directory that took place. But we had thought that someone had actually hacked in or had an external list set up with various different things. So we managed to shut it down, I think, about 9 in the morning. So that's what actually happened. Sorry, I transposed the numbers there. Yes, indeed. Character, but it was actually 72 million emails eventually got sent during the 8 or so hours that it went on, and we were processing about 15,000 emails a second, which is fantastic news. We've never stressed. I never want to again. We did get an award from Microsoft, but a bit of a warning from their technical people, because of course we run a cloud-based email service that they've never seen traffic like that, ever. They've never even seen an attack of that. Which just shows that you need to get thousands and thousands of people together emailing like crazy to get something like that. And we were #1 on Twitter, which I don't believe has ever happened before, which is fantastic. And the funny thing is, I was just at a conference in Spain where similar type events happened to other companies, and they turned it around into success. Because when you get this kind of notoriety, and you become sort of famous for a brief moment, you can go ahead and leverage that. It's quite interesting. We weren't able to do that again because of the night and soon we got home, which seemed to be more interesting. That was lunch, and moved on. But these were the kind of things that's my personal friend below. But it just shows some of the creativity that was going on. People really sort of poured the creativity into it, including. And of course, Lionel had another sort of burst of other people were creating songs, and apparently students were yelling out windows and things like that. So it's very, very fascinating how these things can go so quickly. So what have we learned from all of this? A couple of things. We certainly learned more about the digital world and just how incredibly fast things move. I mean, just lightning fast. From nothing to suddenly, #1 on Twitter. It just exploded. And so obviously one of the things we've learned is you got to play with advance things like this, because there's no way you can go ahead and air for them. Yes. All of our email lists are now restricted by default. And we've taken away the mechanism of creating this so it can happen again. Another thing we learned, which was a really good lesson, was about using language, especially early on, because no one knew what was happening. One of my staff members was chatting to someone on communications, and they used the word hack. They didn't know. They used the word hack. Fortunately, that got attached to this. And in fact, I think the initial website that Communications Marketing set up was called something. And then, of course, the press said that. Of course, they would think that because that's what And so you have to be careful, especially early on, when there's no information in the crisis like this, and what word and language you use. The other thing was that rumors spread really fast and become very, very pervasive. So there was, there's a lot of rumors because someone was impersonating provost that obviously email accounts must have been hacked. So if someone impersonating provost, the word hack was used. So obviously a whole bunch of accounts must have been compromised. And so we had students very worried that their bank accounts have been compromised, and email accounts have been compromised, and all sorts of horrible things that happened. So communications needs to be really fast. And the other thing we learned is all the scary stuff happened too. When else would it go? Middle of the night is. We did, and happy to go ahead and share a report. In fact, with all the IT managers across UCL, we shared a very extensive report of a lot more in depth than this about exactly what happened kind of minute by minute and all the things that we learned. So we learned quite a lot. It was kind of in some ways funny, but also quite a refreshing episode because it could have been much worse. It could have been a giant spam. It could have been, something much nasty. It's just a giant sort of OI2 role. And so it's almost a lightweight preparation for the next topic. Probably will happen again because the digital tools we have today just allow this kind of thing to happen.
Okay, thank you very much, Gavin.
Really, I'm mainly here to sort of provide context and take any questions. Yeah, there is. Gavin covered pretty much everything that happened. I can talk about a little bit about how it looked from our perspective and what we saw from the point where I woke up that morning to the point where we said, right, okay, then that's now gone as well. The interesting thing was the first thing I noticed was actually emails from the students who've gone through various websites, found information security to us and said, look, that's a major problem. So we didn't get a huge number of that. So that was the first thing I noticed. Some of them were saying, I think that's hacked. And some of them were saying, I think that's really loads of spam. But from then on, I started seeing a lot more communication, mainly to start with finding and that was amongst the heads. People were initially, as Gavin was saying, there were a couple of people thinking, hang on a minute, is this an actual hack? Because you see anything unusual happen in your environment, you do tend to worry about whether it's the worst possible thing that could happen. Strange person's got into our system and is basically trying to destroy it or make it look like we're mad by sending stuff from us. Because the first email looked like it came from us, which really did happen. So there were a few emails going, oh my god, how do you do that? But looking at the information, ironically, the next thing I did was reference some of the information I got from the students, which mentioned Twitter. So I started on Twitter, and suddenly I was inundated with information. One of which was a student who had gone through trouble with going through one of the emails, in fact, the first email that had been crossed, and had actually looked at the headers basically to find out whether it really had been crossed. And have, again, this was Twitter, which is not information you can't guarantee whether it's correct or not. But sometimes when you look at stuff on Twitter, sometimes you get this sense of whether or not the promotion A knew what they were talking about, B is likely to have been telling the truth. And this on the sort of guessometer, this came out fairly high. So I thought, okay, that's something I'm going to see if I can verify defensively, but at the moment that's the best information I have. I want to throw the best information is the Twitter feed for someone who says they're a student. That's a very scary thing. So I managed to make my way in with the constant reference to my phone instant email. Increasingly entertaining Twitter posts, because the emails with the Twitter posts are also excellent. There were some amusing ones. There were also some slightly less amusing ones that looked like they'd come from ISP, which can always be a little bit alarming. But no, those were on Facebook. I think one thing to bear in mind for anyone who's thinking about email as something to trust is that it is trivially easy to take an email from someone else. And unless you've got a bit of knowledge, you might realise that the person is sending it. But yeah, you can't guarantee an email is from from can't guarantee it change on its way through. So just because it looks like an almost that was very basically reliable. We got in, and of course you've got well named. Everyone I spoke to, but there is area, needs to all hide that there's all hide underground. Photograph, and that is that. Also, there is no promise at the out, so it's like invisible, non-existent things were affecting other non-existent things. So it was a deeply serious situation. It started to become a little more clear when, first of all, essentially the last thing we had was the fact that it was on our service. So the next thing we started thinking was, well, maybe someone else is faking one of our servers. And they're out on the internet, they've got somebody that looks like the our server that's created a name in it. It's all going through that other machine. God knows how that becomes part of our email system. And so it becomes quite far-fetched at that point. One thing when you're doing incident response is working out, okay, all these different things could happen. Some of them are quite emotionally responsive, they're exciting. And you tend to find yourself focusing on those, like the hooping. It's a big word, it's scary. It takes quite a lot of gossip. So, you can gossip about it if you want to. And it can really divert your attention. Actually, we didn't go too far down the line of let's go on the internet and try and find this experience. But another thing that was slowed down a little bit was communication. The email communication started very well. We managed to start a group of people, identify what the problems were, others, and getting together in the first instance when we got in the office. The handoff between various people as they went through the tunnel, and someone else had to take over and manage it on their way in and then got the incident and then manage them. That looked very effective. And the actual, when you imagine an incident management situation, is everyone goes into a room and they have a discussion and they decide what to do and they go away again. No, that is not how it ever happens. Ever. What happens is you dive towards the first person on the system and find out what happened. And you have the meeting around them and you try not to disturb them as they start feeding you a real-time information about what they say and what really is happening. You don't want them to come back and forth. This is not good for people and it's not going to disturb them. So that's essentially what we did. We started with a sort of small group around people in the service desk. And you could get as copies of people who did have the problem. And then that little clump of worried people promptly moved to the person who's most likely to know about mailing them. And then sort of buzzed around him for a while. There was a sort of slight moment that. But then it became obvious, okay, there is nothing. Let's go and look a bit harder. Hang on, there is a mail. At which point the buzzing cloud of panic around the person who was actually finding it out. This is making you go back to what I'm thinking. At that point it was structured about here. There were initial things. There was quite an array of people coming up with ideas on how to do people overload. I can't guarantee that in amongst of them that you're going to see one thing from you and things that really did. So that's why things have been quite a idea. So yeah, it was very much a real instinct. How you find some of them and go, I want people to it possible. Going through better standard processes and result. This was okay, so everyone has no competencies. We have a person, duty manager, who let's organise around that process. Very fluid, but it was very low sweat. I think the communications that I'm really annoyed about, I should have realised, was the communication that it's already. I think at the point it was being developed, we didn't know, and the last time we said it, and then by the time it came out, we already knew it wasn't. Well, yeah, I think that's kind of our experience of the day. Slightly hectic, but there was always a direction to go in. There was a couple of brief moments of what the information that happened to find out. But once we got the final piece of information fell in place, fix this. Any questions?
Very quickly. So, you did it just
Well, actually, that's a really bad answer. We do not. If you have anything that comes, another question. There was a
that was almost just like Bella.
yes.
You've got to wonder.
It just misspoke.
Which I thought about, I forgot what it was. But it produces much less flavor. Yeah, DNA should like
What have you guys actually done to sort of manage that pretty much doesn't do that?
okay, there are two answers to that. First, for this specifically, we put in place training we know about this wonderful side effect of files in that database. So that is now fully understood and fully confident. How can we prevent anyone from you have processes that involve how is it that it is involved there is some other unexpected side effect? You have an extreme amount some of which are going for that. I can't honestly say and say that this particular type of method is going to be when somebody's designing a magic system, that's great. But the other thing is figuring out.
Does this kind of scenario be reflected in the disaster recovery plan?
We have the problem is the disaster recovery plans are usually about things failing. They're not usually about things start behaving. Also usually about an entire service. So we have to focus on that. So that's a problem. For a there are so many variants. Yeah. Because you want to have the language test, where it looks with your copy machine. So you ask it to copy with 5 words. And I discovered the hard way of the breadth versus depth problem. Because what you can do is you can imagine every possible question someone can ask a copy machine and come up with an answer to every one of those questions. That's breadth. We can think about its depth and assume everyone's going to say, please give me a copy and go through all the various things. That's probably the very specific one. You end up with 1,000 million, I know 1,000 million very short types, but they're very, very far. Or some very specific ones that base themselves on a very, very narrow and unlikely event, which gives you a very detailed statistics of every time to do. So if we have this precise event again, there's something really. But trying something that specific for every case is not
So the other answers to that is that the major incident plans that the university has are prioritized. We have every couple of months majors and team meetings, and what we do is we dream up all the different critical scenarios. So this wouldn't fall in that category. So that's, loss of life, injury to people, severe damage to buildings. So, and we do have just about every type of thing from a riot to, a terrorist attack, and all those kind of things dreamed up. But this wouldn't fall, it's nowhere in that league. And there would be, 10 million different things, just like Bridget says, at this level. So you just couldn't dream them all up.
Would you say that social media was a help or a hindrance?
I think it was a help, but nothing else. It was entertaining.
I don't think it would. I mean, the reality is that it didn't kick off until it was announced on Twitter. I mean, someone announced, said, "Hey, do this cool thing, try it out," and then boom, we just saw it just rocketed. So if Twitter hadn't existed, then everyone would receive 20 or so. So I don't know if that's an answer.
Would it have dwindled away, or would that continued on throughout the first day?
Well, we would have got, it wouldn't have been on the same level. I mean, the damage, the real damage in this was the fact that all the student mailboxes were full of 3,000 or 4,000, which is a problem because, lost in the swill of that is all the coming. So that was the real harm. Now, if you'd received, 20 or 40 or 60 spurious emails over the night, it wouldn't have been that big a deal, but receiving 4,000 months. So it's the scale that was the issue. I mean, everybody receives spam. You expect it. Overnight, I received 5 spam emails. Just do very well. Just like because spam filters can't catch everything. And this would have been just a little bit of abuse, as opposed to waking up to pull out the.
Did every student have to delete their own 4,000?
So no, we eventually developed a tool by the next day, and we then contacted each of the departments so that they could make the decision, because it needs to be really an academic decision as to whether they want to go into delete all the spam emails, or whether they wanted to say to the students. The students could go in and personally delete it. Now, I think a lot of the departments decided to go ahead and use the tool, just mass delete all of their students.
I think so. Now might be a good time to bring in Jane to talk about the communications. There will be a further opportunity to ask questions later. Thank you very much.
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to clear myself of any blame. Steve introduced me as being involved. I was not. And the second thing is to say thank you so much. You presented me with the greatest teaching opportunity I've had in years. And I'll explain why. Hi. For those of you that don't know me, I know loads of you do. I'm Joan Burns. I work in management science and innovation. And these days, I teach marketing and marketing communications here in UCL. This term, we're doing Marcoms, so this was heaven sent for Marcoms coursework. However, I used to have a real job. I used to work for a very, very, very large household name corporate where I was head of communications and change management. And part of that role involved me being actively involved in our planning and managing for crisis. It was a tech company, high-tech company, where we had a lot of techies, we had a lot of geeks, we had a lot of people who knew the IT stuff. But my role was the human side of, if things go wrong, what do we do about it? How do we communicate? And I was responsible for our crisis communications behaviours. Okay, stop here because we're in UCL where everybody argues about semantics. I use the word crisis in a marketing sense. Okay, so we could refer to bellogate if we wanted to as a crisis. A crisis technically is an inflection point betwixt life and death. Nobody died. Believe me, it was not that much of a crisis. But what it was a disruption to business as usual, the business of being UCL, the business of trying to run effective and efficient IT systems. So it was a disruptive activity. Okay. In terms of crisis, and I've been asked by Steve to keep this nice and light, so I will. But in terms of crisis communications, there are a couple of models available to us to inform our thinking about how to communicate in and out of crisis. And the first one of those, and the one that's highly recommended, is called the planning model. I think the name's on the tin, guys. The planning model actually says what we can do is crisis or disruptive incidents occur. Yeah, get over it. They occur. They're unexpected, but they're not necessarily unanticipated. So there are actually classes of things that can occur that may in some way be a threat to the organisation, its livelihood, its production schedules, and its reputation. And actually what we're dealing with in Bellogate to a large extent is a threat to the reputation of UCL. So I'm not here to beat up ISD and say, you should have done this, you should have done that quicker, because they did what they're trained to do and run the IT systems they do, and they did a fairly good job of it. However, what hadn't been thought through was the what ifs. So the planning model says, well, actually, we should sit down as an organisation and consider not the 1,001 or 10,001 things that might happen, but the classes of incidents that might occur. And so an attack on the IT systems in the form of not a hack, but maybe some spoof emails or some incident like this, which causes an unnatural degree of traffic and strain on the systems, might have come within a class of events that could have been anticipated. You don't know how it's going to happen, you don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but there are classes of events that can happen. The other thing we ought to step back and think about is that actually a crisis is a crisis when it's perceived to be a crisis by those who are impacted by it. And we have to step back from this and say, what about the stakeholders? And in this, the primary, most affected stakeholders were the students. And so the way in which they received information about the incidents and the emails, and the way they were responded to was actually critical in driving their perceptions of what was going on. It wasn't helped by the fact that it was a Wednesday night, because for those of you that are students, you may know this stuff, and for those of you that have been students, you may remember this stuff. Wednesday is not the evening when most students are recovering from their sporting activities earlier on in the day, and may often be found in places like Wally's. Recovering from sporting activities. So there's an awful lot of students who may be alcohol fueled on the Wednesday night. So that's not going to help you out, guys, in terms of people wanting to play. The sad thing about universities is that they tend to attract intelligent people as well. So the level of engagement with something when it's perceived as being fun drives the Twitter feeds, drives all the email responses. I didn't actually get to hear about it until fairly early the following morning, when a colleague who was having hysterics at some of the meetings had picked up, because some of those students had let her know what was going on. So it was trending on Twitter. It was also making it onto Facebook, and there was a lot of fun being poked at. Coming back to the model, though, there are ways in which you can isolate classes of incidents and what sort of a threat they are. And may I suggest that you've probably planned on the technical threats without the, some of the softer threats to reputation. UCL is actually masterful at managing its corporate reputation and its corporate identity. And I suspect that a handoff for the relationship with the corporate comms people, might have been appropriate. Having highlighted or having worked out what those clusters of potential threats might be, then we're not going off into the realms of fantasy. We're not thinking about fiction. What we're thinking about is just generalised classes of things that might happen. And from that, then working out the generic classes of response type on the basis of putting into place some sensing mechanism. Now, may I suggest here that one of the the holes in the ISD systems here was the fact that the sensing mechanisms were not formalized. So people started to pick up that there was something odd going on, picked up that there was an issue. Somebody should not be named in this room. I mean, yeah, he picked up fairly early on in the process that it was trending on Twitter ahead of the bake-off at one point. But there was no process in place for escalating it to an appropriate level for action to be taken during the early evening on the Wednesday. That the thing was actually escalating through the night, and the volumes were building up for longer than might have been necessary if a process had been in place to both sense that there was unusual activity and escalate it to a point where something could be done about it. Agree with the point about standing around and everybody's clustering around trying to work out what's happening. I remember very well the afternoon of 9/11, you know, when the corporate comms team in that same organisation was sitting around trying to work out what the heck was going on and whether it was us that was under attack or whether somebody else was under attack. And the call as to whether we were shutting down our corporate IT systems in response to 9/11, not knowing, you know, and the real trouble is that when a crisis hits or an incident like this happens, you don't know. But what you can know is that your sensing mechanisms are triggered and that you've got an escalation process for getting people basically out of bed sooner than they got out of bed on this one, or were perceived to get out of bed on this one. Yeah, maybe some lessons to be learned there. The website, the ISD website of the day, and I may be misquoting them, was actually saying, you know, these systems are unmanned. Okay, now that's in terms of a help desk response. Yes, the systems are unmanned outside of 9 till 5, Monday to Friday, but the sensing mechanisms shouldn't be unmanned. It's a very different thing. The other area, and I will shut up. The other area that's worth thinking about is that there are mitigation strategies, and in particular the communications mitigation strategies, and those need to be thought through in advance of a crisis actually occurring. I think one of the sad things is that this incident could have been an absolutely wonderful opportunity for the province to engage, because there are a number of strategic responses that an organisation that comes under an attack of this type can make. And given that the provost was as much a victim of this as were the students who received the 3,000 and 4,000 emails, there's actually quite a standardised line of response that places the provost as fellow victim. And we will all work together in this to pull things back together, and we will be stronger as a result of it. I think it's a great tragedy that he didn't directly engage with response to students. My own conversations with students, because I diverted all my seminar activity for the rest of the week to this topic. The response from my students was that they were mildly irritated with it. It was a bit entertaining all the night, and then it went away. I think the good thing about whether you're adopting the planning model or it's co-player, which is the reactive model, and actually what we saw play out was the reactive model. Irrespective of which model you're in, the important thing now is that you actually go back and learn the lessons of what happened and where the holes were, and actually work proactively towards making sure that that sort of vulnerability, you know, isn't made evident again. And if things go wrong, as things will go wrong, whatever it is, that there's actually an escalation process and a communications process in place for making sure that the right things are said and done in the right way. I managed a very large Y2K program. I know that's a long time ago, but on the night of the millennium, I sat with my satellite phone in a bunker, seriously, with a raft of press releases that had all been written to cover all the clusters of eventualities that we worked out that we might be presented with. And in the event of any one of those eventualities kicking off, all I needed to do was populate it with the data. You know, what time it was, what day it was, what had happened, but our responses were already written, ready to run. So within 20 minutes of any one incident actually kicking off, we had a proactive statement to the press and media about our response. And we were actually responding to the press and media with what was happening. We went on to the front foot with it all, rather than reacting to it being constantly on the back foot from it. Do go on about the subject. I'll sit down and apologise for that. I think crisis communications is an absolutely fascinating field to work in. Thank you so much for all the fun you've let me have.
Well done. Thank you, Jane. We have one more speaker. You talked about the views of your students in there.
Yeah.
Because he arrived just in the nick of time. We have Adit Trivedi, who ran one of the sessions we did earlier in the week on coding, which was very popular, to give us a student view of what it was like to wake up with 3,000 emails. So yeah, please tell us how it was for you.
So, a student's perspective was quite annoying. I was at home, casually playing FIFA with my friends, and I hear a vibration around 8, 9 o'clock, and then another vibration a minute later, and then so on and so forth. And I was like, right, this is really important. I get to it, and I see these emails from UCL saying, you have signed up for this. I won't mention what it is. You've signed up for this, you've signed up for this. At the point I thought, right, delete. But every constant minute, time after time, I was like, right, I'm gonna put my phone away. Come back after an hour and I see 3-figure digits on my name. And I'm like, right, I've never seen this before. What is going on? So yeah, just put my phone away, left it on silent, went to bed, and woke up with 4 digits. And I'm like, right, what is going on? So in terms of this Bello incident, it was quite annoying because I spent quite a while having to delete each email. I didn't want to set up a rule at the time to say do not allow emails from UCL, because I thought, right, if I get something important and I accidentally delete it, then I may actually regret it. So I went through like each email, individually deleted it. And yeah, so other than it being quite time consuming, it didn't really have much effect on me. I thought, right, probably a hack, which didn't seem to be the case, but I don't really have my card details on there, nothing too personal from my perspective, so it didn't really affect me that too much. Just was a bit time consuming and quite annoying, and I felt that with UCL being such a high class institution, how has this even been possible to do? So yeah, that was my only sort of concept or thought. But other than that, just carried on my day the next day really, and that was it.
Okay, thank you very much, Adit, and thank you to all our speakers. Very interesting to hear your perspectives.
Can I just ask you, do you know anyone who replied all?
Who, sorry?
Do you know anyone who replied all?
No, most of my friends who are actually smart created the rules so that they didn't actually get any more emails. I was a sort of anomaly that left it.
Did you fix the on Twitter or Facebook or anything like that?
So yeah, it was actually quite funny because I had friends from other universities telling me, what is going on with your uni? What is this Bello? And I was like, to be honest, I don't even know myself, so I can't really comment on that. But yeah, it turned out to be quite big. Like you'd read about it in the Telegraph and in the news, and I was like, what? Like, what's going on? But yeah, I guess it's just something you sort of deal with, spend half an hour quickly running through each one, deleting, and then moving along with your day.
I mean, a fascinating thing, we did a look afterwards to try to figure out, because we thought, well, it must be, 5,000-10,000 students doing the reply all, but actually it was less than 1,000. The vast majority of students didn't reply all. They knew they shouldn't, because it would just create a bigger storm, and they were all very sensible about it. But then there was about 900 or so that were doing many reply alls, right? And then a few others sort of caught up and going, oh shoot, they only did it once, but there were a bunch of people doing many reply alls. So yeah, it's very interesting. But the large majority of students stayed out of it.
I also asked what the text message, which Bridget mentioned, said, and wondered what Jane would make of context, okay, because that was the primary kind of how we're going to get the message out to students. So what did it actually say?
I'm sorry, which text message?
Or maybe it was Gavin that mentioned it, that you were thinking
Yeah,
how to
we
communicate with
sent a
students,
text message.
and so sent a text message to students because obviously email wasn't the thing to do. That wasn't what it actually said.
Something along the lines of we apologise for the extraordinary.
UCL apologises for mass spam student emails. The list has now been closed down as of 9:30 this morning, and we are investigating further.
Today. How did that stand out?
Very little else you could have done at that point. I think the issue is that was 15.5 hours after the first incident. And I think the lessons are actually to be learned about making sure it doesn't take 15.5 hours next time.
And so, for the related question then for Bridget, if we had known, because I think Steve got mine being named, he's the person that I think alerted the students and you to what was going on, but by email, and obviously people had kind of gone to bed by it. If he'd have a phone number from somebody like you, would you have wanted to be phoned? And would you have then expected the crisis team to come in to convene around the computer in the middle of the night?
I think, to be honest, if I personally, as a human being, would want to be phoned. The university does not require me to do this.
Okay, can I jump in there, because commercially you would have been required to come in.
Yeah, the university does not have a requirement on us to provide on-call services, but as people in the university, as university members, as individuals, we, generally speaking, will do that.
Yeah. So interesting enough, as a result of this, and another incident happened very soon afterwards, we had recently put in place a 24/7 out of hours call service using the Norman call center. So students and staff will call service desk 24/7, even when the normal UCL service desk is closed. We have a service, and now what we put in place is crisis numbers, which are my numbers, other ISD managers and Bridget as well. And the fascinating thing is, just recently we had an edge roam out Saturday, and it all worked really well because students called into the Norman Thomas call service. It was a Saturday, so the ordinary one on campus here call closed down. They reported to them, edge roam is down. They then called to the list to come home with me. We got an out of hours call, a crisis team together, and got edge roam back up again, which is sort of a fantastic result. But that it came out of bellogate. It was kind of one of the lessons learned out of them about how much you can do out of hours.
Just on that, did you contact any other department? Do you just solely work as ISD?
No, we have, so there's a number of mailing lists. We have, one of them is called the IT Managers Forum, which is the IT managers from all the other departments. And so we contacted them as well, to let them know.
Have you communicated the fact that there is an online 24-hour service? There are issues, because as a student I haven't heard about it, and I haven't heard about the fact that departments got software they can email. And all of my friends I've never heard about it. So I'm just wondering how.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so we put the communications out in a number of ways, including so it hasn't been as good as we thought. So, you see on the news, student newsletters, on the website. We do find it difficult to get to everyone, and any advice about best way to sort of reach everyone, especially things, and it was about 2 months ago we introduced service to be able to call 24/7. So any time of the night or day, 2 in the morning, you just call the normal service desk number, call during the day, and you'll get some. But any suggestions on on what the best way to get those kind of critical messages in?
Could you actually create an official provost at UCL email?
There you go. That's a good one.
That's me again.
My question really is, evidently through Bello, ISD's credibility has been hit, in my view anyways. How do you intend to bring that credibility up? Because now I look at ISD and I think they've had problems before, and because I too haven't received these communication emails, and I didn't know much about this until really this talk. So until this talk, thought it was a hack. So essentially, what can ISD do to really bring their credibility up?
I think there's one of the things we can do is a lot more communications and learn, different medias and ways to go ahead and communicate, but also talk about, sessions like this about learn and how we can improve things. Classic examples in edging and the 24/7 service. But getting any input on how to reach the students, all student emails is obviously probably not the way to do. What media, what do you look at? What's prevalent or to you?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And once again, thank you to our speakers. A very interesting session, and I'm now going to hand over to Janina, who will close the call.
Okay. Well, I want to start my closing process with a very rough, very quick edit of a documentary that High Media are going to be making about digifest. They have been an absolute troopers wandering around throughout the week and filming bits and pieces to help us curate all the good stuff that's happened. And now I'll see what button I press in order to get the screen going. Which one is it?
Show me.
That one. Just an ISD person. And this is just a very rough cut of what went on, or some of what went on.
Digifest has come about because of the Google Plus community that's been made up of a huge variety of people that use that, ranging from undergraduates through to really quite senior teaching staff. They've met on a regular basis since the beginning of the year, and had a meeting initially to discuss what festival could be about, and 139 ideas from students.
How did you whittle it down?
Well, very good question.
Open data is basically data that's been released by government institutions, universities, research centers, groups of people that want to contribute to human development. Governments are releasing data in order for the citizens to understand how the governments function, how they're spending money, how they're spending our taxes, and how research is moving towards the policies so people can get involved in participating in government decisions.
Bitcoin is a form of money which was invented by computer programmers in order to basically send something to each other, which they call bitcoins. There are some monetary units there. Initially, we think it's just plain money, but some people actually take it very seriously and they exchange this plain money against euros, pounds, and dollars. So eventually, it became real money. So there's no central authority in the system, so anybody can just send some bitcoins to another computer, to another person. And if you know somebody's public key, you can send them money and they will appear by magic of cryptography on their mobile phone or on their laptop. It is a technological revolution because it uses cryptography, and actually it's not easy to make cryptography. So there are tens of years of development of cryptographic technology behind. It's the same sort of technology which underpins the internet.
I'm right now. The BFA finally student sign up, and I make kind of experimental. I think like the gap between cinema, especially like also when ideas about the mechanical eye and virtual reality hasn't quite been so the game's called Luxury Simulator, and the idea is that the only way now with the way wealth gap is essentially the only way you can attain that level of wealth is through playing a simulation game of it.
Laptop Orchestra is going to be amazing. Nicholas Gold, who is in computer science, runs a module on computer music, and they're going to be writing and developing a piece of music for the showcase on Friday. We've also got a make your own instrument.
I'm demonstrating the use of a low-cost 3D scanner to the public here. And people are usually very happy to be scanned themselves. The image of themselves in 3 dimensions is somewhat unusual. And it's also very beautiful because it reacts instantly. As you might see, this sensor picks up movement very easily because it was designed for that. And it picks up colors as well. So what we have here is a very device that has the sensor and it has one infrared projector and it has a camera that basically represents patterns. Therefore, the tool can represent it's on a level that's really good and it's big. Very excited about the innovations that are going on and it's going to do so much to and lots of students are aware of it. Like digifest, where we're getting a big red bus in the middle of EPL. It's just an amazing way to actually give students greater access to many of the innovations.
Because I've bridged the gap between like virtual research and art. I have so many friends who are artists, but I don't know anyone else. It's so important. I don't really believe in the barriers between any kind of subject, and I think things like digifest are great because they bring people from, technologists, artists, whatever, together, and everyone's really from technology. I think it's really more of it, really.
Taking people out of the comfort zone of teaching and learning things to get to know different things. I think it makes us more conscious about what is happening around the institution, what's happening in the country, around the society. So I hope it happens more often every year. So congratulations to the team.
So that was a very, very, very tiny snapshot of all the stuff that went on this week. There's going to be a lot more, and we will be on the website when it's finally done. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Anthony, who has kindly agreed to closing up.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Stand in the right position. Thank you. In the right position. So thank you very much. And, thank you to all of the digifest team for what I know has been an exciting and inspiring event. It's been an amazing range of activities. And I was going to catalogue some of them, but in fact the video did a much better job than I could ever hope. To do. Yesterday I was having an interesting went out for a cup of coffee with actually a former PhD student, and he made what actually was a slightly surprising remark. He said, "Isn't it interesting how the word digital is suddenly becoming so widely used? Suddenly, that particular term seems to have, it has a sort of, always had a sort of like 1970s air about it, the digital computer, because of course you have to distinguish it from the analog computer. And suddenly I was struck by it, how we pushed away some of the other terms that we use. Computing, we certainly pushed away the word IT, with all that connotes. We're somehow picking up this this term, what it sort of means. I have a sense that somehow we're grasping on to the whole way in which technology, digital technologies, are seeping into their other areas, and that the hinterlands are no longer perfectly clear. The hinterlands between, music and technology, the hinterlands between art and technology, the hinterlands between economics and technology, between our lives and technology, in very interesting and new sorts and new sorts of ways. So I'd say, let's look at that term, and the way it's used. Another thought that occurred to me in the context of learning about digifest, which is I find what I've always found really fascinating is how what the way to describe this, the ecologies of skills that build up. You would go into a student lab and you watch one student turn around to the other one and goes, how do I do this, that, or the other, and it doesn't go like this. And then later on, it reverses because there's a recognition of this sort of mishmash of skills that people have. Everybody knows a trick, a little hint, something they know something how to do that other people don't. And that's really true of computing and digital technology. That in this organisation, there's immense richness of people who just know some way of doing something, some trick, some technology that they know how to do. And what digifest, I think, has done is has enabled some of that discourse to start happening. I don't know how many of you have been into the Institute of Making, into the makerspace. It's really exciting when that how real concrete, how physical technologies often enable this. Somebody's hitting something with a big hammer, and another person leans over and goes, what, you could do that with a smaller hammer, whatever it happens to, whatever it happens to be. They rarely say a small hammer. You get the general gist. But that sense of us being able to lean over each other's shoulders and go, you know what, you could do it like this. You know what? Did you think this was possible? And my sense is that what digifest is enabling is that sense of a community and of an ecology of skills. And the last thing, there's a term which I really dislike, actually. The term which I really dislike is digital native. One reason I dislike the term digital native is because digital native is always thought of as being my kids. And actually, they're no more digital natives than I am. It's pretty much brought up with my Acorn computer, whatever it was. And actually, it's a total misunderstanding. But what in fact we have got is a plethora of digital natives in different territories, natives with different sets of understandings and skills. And if we can bring that together, we can bring the whole tribe together. Maybe there's something great we can do. So really, it's a shame to call digifest to a halt. But you need a fantastic job, and I'd like to thank everybody who's involved, everybody who's been a member of the audience. I'm really sorry I missed the bellogate thing. I have to tell you that anything whose outcome was that marvellous downfall parody, that's got to be worth. That's going to be worth the heart ache. just for that. And I would just ask you to spare one last thought for my colleague Dina Bello.
Just wanted to jump in and really wanted to thank Steve and Janina and Moira for the extraordinary amount of work. And I know that there's a big team working behind them and supporting them and making it all happen, but you three have been, I don't know, something extraordinary. So the amount of effort you put in over the months
the weeks, the weekends, evenings, closing up the bus every night this week, Steve, putting it back in its place when it gets shifted by naughty students. You know, it's been amazing. So we were trying to think what to get. Was it, you know, should get some plans, some chocolate, some alcohol? Couldn't decide, got me all three. That's when it's probably going to suit. Steve, you're not really a meat guy, are you? And then we've got red, which I know Steve is a red man, and red for Moira. His wife on that. White for Gina, because I know he's and some multi-spectral chocolates. So thank you so much, guys. You know, you've really done the most amazing job. It's been a fascinating week. Such rich stuff.
We weren't on our own. I've got a very, very long thank you list, and I'd like you to really, really give a round of applause. We've got a live stream, so give an applause to all the presenters we've had from all the departments, groups, student societies, everybody who jumped onto the opportunity to be part of this. Applause, come on. Wonderful volunteers. We had a whole range of volunteers from all sorts of departments. Keep it going. And Media, who's been running around, filming everything, and Federico Barney in particular, who's been pulling it all together, is responsible for this very, very high-speed edit that he did last night, last minute. Huge round of applause. And all please to Molly's in particular, who's been helping us with all the streaming, and everybody who's been involved in the streaming, like Sarah, and so many other people like that. Well, where am I on my list? There's more to come. There's more. Big thanks to everybody, and we shouldn't forget the people who were behind the scenes, such as the security desk, especially down here, who've been helping people navigate the maze around here, all the different 103 rooms. Thanks to everybody who helped make it happen, from departmental comms teams to estates teams, AV services. More. You volunteering, who've been so instrumental getting us volunteers recruited and have advised us on how to go about it. Room bookings for wrangling us some space. Albeit a little bit late sometimes. And there's probably a whole host of more people in the background who've helped out making this all happen. Thank you to our colleagues for filling in the gaps when we had gaps to fill, and for lugging all the equipment and boxes back and forwards. So that didn't go unnoticed either. And thanks to everybody who added to the G+ community. You know, there's so much posts and inspiration and so much stuff's gone on behind the scenes in planning this. We've been at this since April. And there's been so much of, 140 people in the Google+ community in the end.
And it's growing even this morning. So
even this morning, people have still joined it, even though we're no longer, well, we've got to be planning the next one, who knows? Thanks to everybody who's tweeted about the event, helped with the website, did Facebook promotion, generally has been flying the flag for this festival since April and throughout this week, and particularly this week. And last but not least, I'd like to apologise again to Anthony for giving him literally an elevator pitch earlier this year and cornering him in the lift downstairs and going, have you heard about this digifest thing? And last but not least, thanks to everybody who's attended this week, and without an audience, it would have been a really sad festival. And now I'm going to go. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for the lovely gift.
And of course, we now move next door where we have wine and drinks.
Wine and drinks.
Wine and drinks. I apologise, we are a little tired, I must say.